Do you remember when building the front end was fun? Today, it's a nightmare. It's easier to build a geo-distributed backend than it is to understand the modern front-end stack. What went wrong? How did we create this monster? And can we fix it? Let's try to answer these questions. To understand how we got here, we need to step back in time. Fowler, in his Patterns of Enterprise Applications, says that with the advent of client-server and OOP, there was a definite push towards a three-layer architecture, where the UI is just a thin presentation layer without domain logic. In fact, we saw the MVC pattern evolving into the MVP and later the MVVM, and all these patterns aim at creating a clear separation between the view, which is what the user sees, and the actual logic. But why was everyone so keen on making the view a dumb or passive layer? And the main reason was one: testability. Testing the UI has always been a nightmare. I want to quote Fowler again, this time from his blog post Humble Object, where he says that some elements are difficult or even impossible to test, thus they are prone to bugs. To mitigate this problem, move as much logic as possible out of the hard-to-test element. When you separate the view from the logic, you can test your core business rules without the UI, which is the goal of clean, hexagonal and onion architectures, which we cover a lot in this channel. Keeping the UI lean also paid off, because the UIs tend to change more often than the business rules. And with the rise of mobile, TV and Internet of Things, it can happen that you need to build more front-end stacks around one core business model. By the late 2000s, building a UI was a piece of cake. You could use PHP or maybe Spring MVC with a templating engine, and you could sprinkle on top some JavaScript and jQuery just to give some dynamic behavior to your web page. However, some developers were not happy, they wanted more. And here starts the modern front-end story. Chapter 1: The rise of the single-page application. While we were happily building pages with server-side rendering, the single-page application started gaining popularity. And that's where the trouble began. We wanted richer, faster, more desktop-like user experiences. And most importantly, we didn't want a full page reload every time the user clicks or submits a form. But how do you achieve that? You need to move the state and some logic on the browser. This was the first crack in the dam. Chapter 2: The Component Revolution and State Management Crisis. With the release of AngularJS in 2010 and React in 2013, we saw an explosion in the popularity of the SPAs. These frameworks gave us powerful concepts like two-way data binding and reusable components, which were fantastic for building complex UIs. But this created a new problem. How do all these little components communicate and share state? This led to the rise of complex state management libraries like Redux. And where do you think developers started placing some business logic? You guessed it, it began hiding deep inside front-end state management stores. Chapter 3: The Tooling Explosion. To manage this increasingly complex client-side web, we needed a massive ecosystem of tools, bundlers like Webpack, transpilers like Bubble, and a million other libraries just to get a simple app running. And that's where that massive node modules folder come from. Slowly, without a grand plan, we didn't just add complexity, but we rebuilt an entire backend right inside the browser. Think about it, modern frontends now have client-side routing, complex data caching and synchronization, state machine, and tons of business validation and logic. But here comes the funny part. We eventually realized that having this massive application on the browser was bad for SEO and initial paid load performance. So what did we do? We came up with a new solution. server-side rendering. So we went full circle. This gave rise to incredibly powerful but also mind-bending meta frameworks like Next.js. Now we have a single framework that is both a backend and a frontend. We have logic that can run on the server, on the client, or both, blurring the line of responsibility completely. Easy, right? Our solution to having a backend on the browser was to create a frontend on the server, making the monster even more complicated and confusing. And that's not enough. With the advent of AI and vibe coders, the popularity of the stack is skyrocketing, because with a simple prompt you can generate a nice looking proof of concept, and with a couple of clicks you can deploy it to production. But if you've been in the industry long enough, you know that these apps are an architectural disaster, not fit for any real long-term production system. So what do we do now? Can we fix it? The answer is not simple. From a purely theoretical perspective, we could re-establish the backend as the single source of truth. If it's business logic, if it defines a core process of rules, it belongs in the backend, period. Then rather than moving logic to the frontend, we could embrace architectural patterns like the Backend-for-Frontend or BFF. This is a dedicated service that sits between your main backend and UI, and its job is to prepare and shape data specifically for the view, allowing the frontend to remain clean, simple, and focus exclusively on presentation. I did a video about this in the past. Something else we could do is embrace the humble object philosophy. For every line of logic we read into the frontend, we can ask ourselves, does this truly have to be here? And very often the answer is no. Or maybe we need to ditch the SPA when it's not really necessary. In conclusion, while the backend world democratized development with frameworks like Spring Boot reducing complexity, the frontend took the opposite trajectory. It embraced complexity. I can't help but wonder if the strict backward compatibility with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript has forced us to create these complex towers of abstraction just to get things done on the browser in an object-oriented way. Building the frontend should be fun and focus on presenting data and handling user inputs, not in managing state and domain logic. Anyway, that's what I think. What about you? Is the frontend monster real? Have you seen it in your projects? Let me know in the comment section below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, enable notifications, and share so that everyone can learn something new. Ciao!